So these are the things to do if you want to know about the business. Use the product yourself. If you are on Tide detergent, use Tide detergent and wash your clothes with it. If you're on a certain shampoo, Prel shampoo, if there still is such a thing, use it. If you're on a certain, work for a restaurant, you'll eat in the restaurant, I mean, whatever it is, use it yourself. And act like a customer. Call the helpline. See if somebody answers. See how they treat you. See how hard it is to get help. Have a fact book. Back in the day, we used to prepare these huge binders and carry them around. And now, of course, you can put it all in your laptop or your iPad. Basically, this would mean if you're the youngest person, or the first junior person on the business, it would really be smart if you're the one who has all the answers to questions that come up in meetings. And so what you would do is you would get all the pertinent information and put it in files on your computer. For instance, you would put all previous ad campaigns in one file on your laptop, along with the dates that the ads ran. You would have business results going back, whether it's share of market or sales or shipments or whatever it is. You would have research put in files by focus groups, advertising research, etc. So basically, you'd be able to quickly put your hands on whatever it is that a question came up about and have some answers. And boy, will you be a star if you do something like that, whether your boss asked you to or not. I already talked about doing retail visits and how important that is. And then this is a little quote from a gentleman named David Ogilvy, who founded an agency called Ogilvy and Mather. Very successful, large, well-known agency, which was bought by WPP Group, one of the 3 or 4 large agency conglomerates. And this says, you better understand the product if you want to write about it, meaning you better use it. And so if you have the knowledge on the business, and particularly about the research and what's really going on out there, and you use that as the basis for your ideas, you're gonna be a winner. Who is the consumer? What are the issues? Where is she in the purchase funnel? How will we move her? And do not forget what happens at retail. And there's actually a function in ad agencies now called account planning. It started, I would say, in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. A lot of the first people who did it were actually British, because they've been doing it in England for a while. And the account planner is the person who is supposed to understand the customer, to know all the research backwards and forwards, and be able to bring it into meetings and almost give customer feedback, if you will, based on research to any advertising or any idea that's shown. And it's an interesting role in the agency, just underlining the importance to know the facts. Knowledge is power. Okay, so why do we use research? Well, again, I like to start with definitions, and this is a definition of research: systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. And as I said previously in the earlier part 1, research, even market research, is scientific and adheres to scientific principles. And science is a rigorous, systematic approach designed to eliminate bias and other subjective influences in the search, identification, measurement, and validation of facts and cause-effect relationships from which scientific laws may be deduced. Boy, that's a mouthful. But again, even market research adheres to these principles. Problem solving in science is, as you can see here, a step-by-step approach. You identify and define a problem. Defining the problem with ocean spray. What is the problem? Why is the goal not being accomplished? The better you understand that, the better solution you will have. Accumulating relevant data. Formulating a tentative hypothesis. Conducting experiments to test the hypothesis, interpreting the results objectively, repeating the steps until an acceptable solution is found. And that's what you apply to curing cancer is what you would apply, although on a much less serious note, to figuring out how ocean spray can do a better job of appealing to millennials. Examples of research. Well, political polling is research. And we'll be hearing more and more of those as elections, particularly as the presidential election rolls around. Political polling is done either by computer or very often by telephone. And large samples of people are asked to give opinions and respond to certain questions, and then who they're going to vote for, etc. And then candidates and others look at those polls and get a sense of what the movement is. And as we have seen, it's rare that a political poll is going to be completely 100% accurate. There's usually a margin of error based on the statistics and the sample size, etc., etc. And also, a political poll is a moment or a number of moments in time, and everything could change the next day. But nevertheless, valuable, scientific. Now, this is a picture of a guy in a nice white apron with glasses, standing in a garden. And you may note he has a clerical collar and a little pitchfork. Not really a pitchfork, actually. No, it's a cultivating fork. Anyone who has a garden knows that. You use it to dig and loosen the soil so you can get to the roots. I have a phone call. I'll be right back. So Gregor Mendel was a monk who lived in the 19th century. He lived in Austria. He was a friar, and he liked to garden. And he did some basic research on heredity and characteristics that are passed on from one generation to the next. And he used pea plants, the kind of plants that grow peas. And he was studying recessive and dominant traits. So it's like if somebody has blonde hair and somebody has brown hair, what do their offspring have? So this actually, his experiments, although he didn't know what was the cause of everything and what was really going on kind of physically, but it basically proved that there was such a thing as genes and DNA that determine the traits of offspring. I'm going through this because I want to give you guys an example of simple science and of the concept of testing one variable at a time. And I'm hoping that by doing this, this will kind of lodge in your brains and you will look at research projects in the same sort of scientific way that marketing research projects. So there are a bunch of different traits of pea plants. There's the height of the plants. Another one is the color of the flower. There are only two choices for colors, purple or white flowers. And so what he found was that if he bred purple pea plants to other purple pea plants for 7 generations, he got pure purple pea plants every time. And the same happened when he bred white to white. It took 7 generations of plants to basically get rid of the recessive characteristic, recessive trait. But what would happen if purple was bred to white? He asked with bated breath. So, what he found was that the first generation of purple bred to white, all the baby plants were purple. So, his hypothesis was that purple is the dominant characteristic over white. And then he took that second generation and he selfed each purple plant, meaning that he breeds the plant, the pollen from each flower to fall on its own stigma. That sounds vaguely shady. The result, 929 pea seeds. He plants all the seeds, and in generation 2, he finds every time a 3-to-1 ratio, 705 purple to 224 white. So, this is not some accidental, random thing that determines whether a plant is purple or white flowers. There's something going on behind the scenes, and of course we know that's something genes and DNA. And he did the same with height and other characteristics. And so the conclusion is when two different traits were mated together, one trait disappears in generation 1 and then reappears in 1/4 of generation 2. And the explanation, there are hereditary determinants for different traits, which are genes. Genes are in pairs, and some are dominant and some recessive. And there's a purple pea plant, and there's a white pea plant. And there is a little picture of DNA, or something that looks like DNA. But again, remember, he tests one characteristic, one variable at a time. So consumer research, quantitative consumer research, is applying scientific principles to the understanding of consumer behavior to guide and improve our marketing efforts. So when we do market consumer research, we want large sample sizes. Many times with political surveys, it's in the thousands or tens of thousands of people. And the smallest we want to go is maybe 100, maybe less, interviews with 100 different consumers. And then, you're going to have a margin of error. It's not going to be completely projectable, but you have a pretty good idea of where it is. So consumer research is scientific. So there are two main types of research data, as we've said, I think, previously. The first is secondary data, meaning somebody else did it. It's data that exists somewhere, and a lot of it is in the Gladys Marcus Library, which is a great resource for you guys. Hang on, let me stop. One of those pesky marketing calls, but anyway, that's what comes from working from home. Gladys Marcus Library. And primary data means you are the one who gets the information. So it's custom made, never been done before, you're the one who's going to do it. So there's our secondary research, and there's our little primary research picture. And so let's talk about secondary data now for a bit. Oh, I should have changed. Okay, hang on. Did that slide say Pizza Hut? Well, not anymore, because that was last year. That was last year's student competition case study. And now it says Ocean Spray, as it should. So you guys are doing your secondary research, and you are using it and doing it now, and you are using it for Ocean Spray. And it's cheap and can be obtained at lower costs generally than having to do primary research. And you want to make sure it's relevant, accurate, as current as possible. You don't want results from 10 years ago. You want results as recent as possible and impartial. And here are some sources for secondary research, and you'll find these, like the library has a subscription to Hoover's, which is a very good kind of from a financial perspective overview of companies, but I'm hoping you will look up Ocean Spray on Hoover's. Standard & Poor's is other great research. And is there a beverage industry trade group, everyone, that you can find? Most industries have trade associations. You'll probably find that there's a trade association monthly magazine, which may give you some very good trend information. So, now, there are also secondary sources for researching consumers. There are expenditure surveys available. The library has these too. U.S. Census data, demographic and psychographic data. Now, you'll remember that when you guys did the icebreaker, you put down your zip code and you said how many people were in your zip code. Well, there's demographic information that gives average information for people who live by zip code. There are also qualitative information, psychographics, and something called VALS. The library has a lot of this kind of thing too.